Grand Ole Opry legend Stringbean Akeman and his wife were murdered in their home back in 1973.
I don't have any right to ask for forgiveness.
On the night of November 10th, 1973, David Stringbean Akeman, the beloved country entertainer, and his wife Estelle returned to their quiet rural home in Ridgetop, Tennessee, after a Grand Ole Opry performance. But what should have been a peaceful night turned into a horrifying nightmare. They were tragically killed during an ill-fated home invasion. For decades, the internet has been captivated by the bizarre case of Stringbean. Some called it a hoax, but after months of digging through hidden archives and decoding cryptic messages, we finally have answers. And by the end of this video, nothing will look the same again. Before the fateful year of 1973, Nashville, Tennessee was more than just a burgeoning music city. It was a sanctuary, a tight-knit community that operated on a foundation of trust and neighborly goodwill. In this unique subculture, handshakes were as binding as contracts, and the notion of betrayal seemed a distant concept. Homes, particularly those of its beloved country music stars, were often left unlocked, a testament to an era when personal safety was largely taken for granted. This was a time when the lines between performer and audience, and between neighbors, were blurred by a shared sense of community, a rarity in the evolving entertainment landscape. At the very heart of this idyllic, almost pastoral world stood David Stringbean Akeman, a cherished figure within the country music community. Stringbean was a living connection to the genre's earliest, most authentic roots. He was a devoted preservationist of old-time sounds, a master of the five-string banjo, renowned for his distinctive frailing technique. His unique blend of homespun humor and profound musicality made him a household name, particularly through his regular, highly anticipated appearances on the Grand Ole Opry and the wildly popular national television show Hee Haw. To many, Stringbean embodied the very essence of a simpler, more innocent era in country music, a gentle soul whose presence brought smiles and a sense of enduring tradition. His warmth and genuine nature were widely recognized. Even country music icon Loretta Lynn fondly recalled Stringbean and his wife Estelle as some of the nicest folks you could find anywhere. Younger artists looked up to him, revering his instrumental savvy and deep, unwavering love for traditional country music. However, this cherished innocence, this perceived sanctuary of Music City, was shattered with a brutal and shocking force. The horrific discovery of their murder made the following morning by their neighbor and close friend, fellow Opry star Grandpa Jones, who had arrived for a planned hunting trip. How did a man so full of life, laughter, and humble beginnings end up being the victim and at the very center of such an awful crime? Who was Stringbean before the headlines, before the horror? To understand the legend, we have to go back to where it all began. From humble roots to Opry star, David Akeman, who would later become universally known as Stringbean, was born on June 17, 1915, in the quiet town of Annville, Kentucky. Was himself a banjo player who performed at local dances. It was at the tender age of 12 that David acquired his first banjo, a memorable exchange for a pair of prized bantam chickens. This early start laid the foundation for a career that would span decades and leave an indelible mark on country music. Initially, Akeman honed his skills playing at local dances, but the meager income proved insufficient to sustain him during the challenging Depression era. This economic hardship led him to join the Civilian Conservation Corps, where he contributed to building roads and planting trees, a common path for many seeking stability during that period. His distinctive nickname, Stringbean, originated from a moment of forgetfulness by bandleader Asa Martin during an early performance. Martin, unable to recall Akeman's name, introduced him simply as Stringbean in reference to his tall, slender physique. The moniker stuck, becoming synonymous with his unique stage presence. Akeman's versatility soon became apparent. While primarily a musician, he stepped into the singer comic one night when another performer failed to show, a turning point that solidified his dual identity as both a comedic and musical talent. His career trajectory saw him perform on WLAP-AM in Lexington, Kentucky, and with various groups throughout the late 1930s. A surprising facet of his early life included semi-professional baseball, where he crossed paths with bluegrass pioneer Bill Monroe. This connection proved significant, as Akeman would later play banjo for Monroe's band from 1943 to 1945, contributing to iconic recordings such as Goodbye, Old Pal. After his departure from Monroe's band, he was famously replaced by Earl Scruggs, a banjoist whose style diverged significantly from Stringbean's traditional approach. In 1945, Akeman married Estelle Tanfill, a partnership that would last a lifetime. That same year, his comedy duet with Willie Egbert Westbrook earned them an invitation to perform on the prestigious Grand Ole Opry. The following year, he began a long and fruitful collaboration with Louis Marshall Jones, better known as Grandpa Jones, another old-time banjo player and comedian. Their professional relationship blossomed into a deep personal friendship as they worked together at the Opry for many years and later became neighbors and co-stars on the Hee Haw television series. Stringbean also found a mentor in Uncle Dave Macon, one of the biggest stars of the Opry, who, near the end of his life, bestowed upon Akeman one of his prized banjos, a symbolic passing of the torch. But how did this humble, banjo-strumming entertainer go from Opry stages to becoming a household name across America? What was it about his charm, his timing, and his twang that made audiences fall in love? The Hee Haw phenomenon, Stringbean's unique old-time singing style, and his distinctive instrumental prowess, particularly his mastery of the five-string banjo, were deeply rooted in a profound love for traditional country music. This authentic connection to the genre's heritage, combined with his gentle, unassuming humor and inherent humanity, earned him the admiration and reverence of a younger generation of artists. He was not merely a performer, he was a cultural anchor, preserving sounds and styles that might otherwise have faded. His nationwide fame reached unprecedented heights as a beloved cast member of the hit television show Hee Haw. On this popular program, his comedic routines and banjo playing, often performed in his signature, somewhat bizarre costume, endeared him to millions of viewers across America. Stringbean was more than just an entertainer on Hee Haw. He was perceived as a living, breathing dinosaur of country music's earliest days, a performer whose artistry relied on a direct, personal connection with his audience, a stark contrast to the emerging trend of music as a mass-produced commodity. His presence on the show cemented his image as a quintessential figure of traditional country and folk music. A simple life, a hidden fortune. Despite his widespread fame and consistent work, Stringbean and Estelle maintained a remarkably frugal and simple life in their rural Tennessee home. A critical detail of their lives, and one that would tragically intertwine with their fate, was their deep-seated distrust of financial institutions. Having lived through the devastating bank failures of the Great Depression, they harbored a profound skepticism towards banks, preferring instead to keep their hard-earned money at home, often in substantial amounts of cash. This practice, born from a past era of economic instability, inadvertently created a dangerous vulnerability. Word of Akeman's habit of keeping large sums of cash on hand circulated as common gossip around Nashville. His close friend and confidant, Grandpa Jones, recognized the inherent danger in this practice and had, on multiple occasions, warned Stringbean about the risks associated with keeping so much money unsecured in their home. This financial habit, while a prudent measure in Stringbean's mind given his historical experiences, tragically made him and Estelle a prime target for those with ill intent. The irony of their careful, Depression-era financial prudence leading directly to their demise is a heartbreaking and bitter aspect of their story. This seemingly sensible but old-fashioned approach to managing their wealth ultimately became the fatal flaw that attracted the attention of their future assailants, transforming a personal financial choice into a tragic catalyst. The night the music died. Stringbean's final Grand Ole Opry performance, Saturday, November 10, 1973, began like countless other show nights for David "Stringbean" Akeman. He took to the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, a venue he had graced for decades, performing with his characteristic charm and musicality. On this particular evening, he frailed his final phrases on his cherished Vega No. 9 5-string banjo, delivered his signature hand wave, and executed his iconic hat flip one last time. Unknown to him or his adoring audience, this performance would be his last. He was stepping off the Opry stage and into the history books in a way no one could have foreseen. His father-in-law, Kurt Gibson, a fellow musician, shared the stage with him that night, a touching detail in the unfolding tragedy. While Stringbean was captivating audiences on stage, a sinister plot was unfolding miles away at his rural Ridgetop home. Two men, cousins John and Doug Brown, had already infiltrated the property. They had been drawn by the persistent rumors circulating in Nashville about Stringbean's habit of keeping substantial amounts of cash hidden within his home. What makes their crime particularly chilling is the calculated premeditation involved. The Browns, rather than acting opportunistically, tuned into the live Grand Ole Opry broadcast on Stringbean's own radio, using the performance as a macabre timer to know precisely when the beloved couple would be returning home. They waited for hours in the darkness. As David and Estelle Akeman finally pulled into their driveway, their peaceful return dissolved into a nightmare. Stringbean, upon entering the cabin, apparently sensed danger and came in with a gun drawn, leading to a brief, desperate gunfight. He was shot dead inside his home, in front of his own fireplace. Estelle, attempting to flee the horrific scene, was tragically chased down and shot in the back of the head outside their home. Neither Stringbean nor Estelle had a chance against their attackers. The calculated nature of the ambush, using Stringbean's own performance as a signal, elevates this crime beyond a simple burglary gone wrong, revealing a disturbing level of malice and planning. The following morning, Sunday, November 11, 1973, a pall of dread descended upon the Akeman property. Stringbean's closest friend and fellow hee-haw star, Louis "Grandpa" Jones, arrived at the cabin, located at 2308 Baker Road, near Ridgetop. They had a long-standing tradition of going hunting together, a regular early morning ritual that spoke to the depth of their friendship. Instead of a companion ready for the woods, Grandpa Jones discovered a scene of unspeakable horror: the lifeless bodies of his beloved friends. The profound personal connection between Stringbean and Grandpa Jones, coupled with Jones's prior warnings about keeping cash at home, intensified the tragedy. As Grandpa Jones stood there in shock, the painful truth must have hit him hard. He had often warned Stringbean about the risks of keeping money at home, and now his worst fear had come true. Knowing he had tried to prevent it made the tragedy even more heartbreaking, adding to the deep tragedy of losing his close friend. The immediate aftermath, the news of the Akemans' awful murders, stunned Nashville to its core. The tight-knit country music community, built on a foundation of unity and mutual trust, was immediately engulfed in shockwaves. This was not merely a local crime. It was an awful homicide that instantly and irrevocably altered the way country stars lived and perceived their safety. The cherished illusion of security that had long defined their lives in Music City was shattered, replaced by a chilling sense of vulnerability. Loretta Lynn, a close friend, articulated the collective grief, describing the loss as heartbreaking. The community grappled with the sudden and violent intrusion of darkness into their seemingly insulated world, prompting an immediate and profound reevaluation of personal safety and the very nature of their communal existence. In the immediate aftermath of the horrific murders, a cloud of mystery initially hung over the killings, casting a pall of concern over the safety of other Grand Ole Opry stars. To aid in the apprehension of the culprits, a substantial reward of $25,000 was quickly offered for information leading to their arrest. It was a crucial tip from a convict who negotiated a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation that provided the breakthrough law enforcement desperately needed. Acting on this intelligence, police swiftly moved to arrest two individuals, 23-year-old cousins John Brown and Doug Marvin Brown. Even though their crime ended up as a disaster, the Brown brothers reportedly couldn't keep it to themselves. In a shocking show of arrogance, they began bragging about what they had done, a big mistake that eventually led to their arrest. The main reason for the killings, according to investigators, was robbery. The cousins acted on a common rumor that Stringbean kept lots of cash hidden in his house. Sadly, this belief was wrong. It came from a misunderstanding of Stringbean's real financial situation and his habit of saving money like people did during the Great Depression. But it was enough to make them target him and his wife. However, the reality of what they managed to steal was shockingly minimal and utterly senseless in comparison to the lives they took. The Browns made off with little more than a chainsaw and some firearms. The profound futility of their actions became even more apparent as the investigation progressed. The killers completely missed the cash Stringbean had on his person at the time of the murder, which amounted to approximately $5,700, equivalent to over $50,000 today. They also missed the $2,000 Estelle had hidden in her bra. Most importantly, they never found the thousands of dollars hidden around the house, the very money they were after. In the end, the few items they did steal were worth very little compared to what they missed. 2 lives were taken for almost nothing, making the crime feel even more pointless and tragic. It was a heartbreaking reminder that the whole thing didn't just end badly. It never made sense to begin with. The trials and convictions, the legal proceedings, and the sentences handed down. Following their swift apprehension, justice for David and Estelle Akeman proceeded with remarkable speed. The cousins were arrested within a couple of months of the incident, brought to trial, and subsequently convicted. Both John and Doug Brown were handed exceptionally long sentences, each receiving 198 years in prison. Doug Brown, one of the perpetrators, attempted to appeal for a new trial, but his efforts proved unsuccessful. Despite his claim that he was not the one who fired the fatal shots in either instance, his admission to the burglary that directly resulted in the deaths of the Akemans led to his conviction under the felony murder rule. This legal principle holds that if a death occurs during the commission of a felony, all participants in that felony can be held responsible for the murder, regardless of who pulled the trigger. Doug Brown ultimately spent the remainder of his life incarcerated. He died in prison in 2003, serving out his sentence behind bars. His death closed one chapter of the tragedy, leaving his cousin, John Brown, as the sole surviving perpetrator, still facing the long consequences of their actions. John spent over 4 decades of his life incarcerated, serving a significant portion of his 198-year sentence. During his extensive time behind bars, Brown reportedly underwent a profound personal transformation. Accounts indicate that he turned to faith, becoming deeply involved in religious activities, including serving as a prison chaplain. He also pursued educational opportunities, obtaining 2 degrees, and maintained a consistent record of good behavior, staying out of trouble within the prison system. When he faced the parole board, he expressed deep remorse for his actions, stating candidly, "I don't have any right to ask for forgiveness. It's unforgivable." This apparent change and his expressed contrition formed the basis of his repeated attempts to gain parole. Despite his reported transformation and his pleas for forgiveness, his bids for parole were met with significant resistance and were repeatedly denied for many years. When he became eligible again in 2014, the prospect of his release ignited a fierce backlash from within the country music community and among the public. A powerful campaign was mounted by prominent Grand Ole Opry stars, including revered figures such as Bill Anderson, Jan Howard, Gene Shepard, and Mac Wiseman, all of whom vehemently opposed his release. Jan Howard, in a display of solidarity with the victims, even spoke directly at Brown's parole hearing, voicing her opposition. The sentiment among many was one of profound disbelief and indignation. Mac Wiseman, a respected voice in country music, publicly condemned the potential parole as a great miscarriage of justice, declaring that it made him question the legal system. He further articulated a widely held belief, stating, "I fully believe that the good Lord forgives us for our mistakes, but the parole board members don't have the authority, spiritually or otherwise, to forgive that man, I don't think." Gene Shepard echoed this unwavering stance, asserting, "Why should they turn him loose? He cold-bloodedly killed 2 friends of ours." The animosity from the public, still deeply affected by the senseless loss of Stringbean and Estelle, remained strong. The memory of the brutal murders and the love people had for the couple made it hard, and for some, impossible to forgive. The controversial release, the 2014 decision, and the ethical debate it ignited. Despite the overwhelming opposition from country music legends and a significant portion of the public, the Tennessee Board of Parole made a controversial decision in October 2014. They voted to grant parole to John Brown, who was then 64 years old. This decision immediately reopened old wounds in the country music world, reigniting a complex and deeply emotional ethical debate. The discussion centered on fundamental questions of justice, mercy, punishment, compassion, remorse, and the very possibility of true redemption. Brown's wife argued for his release on the grounds of grace, asserting that mercy and grace is not earned, it's given. However, for many, particularly the friends and colleagues of Stringbean and Estelle, the idea that the parole board could grant forgiveness for such a heinous crime felt like an overreach of authority, a sentiment powerfully articulated by Mac Wiseman and Gene Shepard. So the decision about what would happen to John Brown didn't bring peace or a sense of justice for many people. Instead, it raised more questions and mixed feelings, making the whole story feel even more confusing and upsetting. It only added to the sense that nothing about this case ended well. The Unfound Fortune, the 1996 discovery. In a final bitter twist to the tragic story, a shocking discovery was made in 1996, more than 20 years after the murders. The new owner of Stringbean's house found nearly $20,000 in cash, carefully hidden behind a brick in the chimney and inside the walls, just as Stringbean had left it. This was the exact money the Brown cousins had been looking for, the rumored fortune that led them to commit the brutal murders. However, the passage of time had rendered the discovery profoundly ironic and ultimately useless. Most of the money had been severely damaged by rodents and was completely unusable. This post-facto revelation served as a potent and painful symbol of the ultimate pointlessness of the crime. The killers had taken 2 lives for virtually no gain, missing the vast majority of the money they coveted, which then decayed, unrecovered for decades. This discovery showed just how pointless the crime really was. The murders were a terrible waste of life, all for money the killers never even found. It proved that the whole thing was never worth it, a shocking and brutal act done for something that in the end they couldn't even get. Solving the mystery didn't bring comfort. It just made the story feel even sadder and more tragic. Nashville's lost innocence, a cultural shift. The 1973 murder of Stringbean and Estelle Akeman transcended a mere criminal act. It forever changed Nashville's sense of itself. This brutal event was a definitive turning point that irrevocably shattered the cherished illusion of safety and communal trust that had long permeated the tight-knit Nashville community. Before this tragedy, Music City was characterized by the best qualities of any small town, where interactions were based on handshakes, promises, and word of mouth, devoid of the pervasive fear of betrayal. However, the violent deaths of the Akemans forced everyone to rethink all that, leading to a palpable shift where people began looking over their shoulders and wondering what was happening. The death of Stringbean, a figure who embodied the traditional community-focused essence of country music, ushered in a colossal, almost industry-wide shift in the country music world. The very fabric of country music, once defined by its intimate community where performers interacted closely, recorded together, and shared their art in a unique, family-like manner, began to transform. It became more akin to other genres, where artists were increasingly isolated and less connected to one another. The shock of what happened made people uncomfortable talking about Stringbean's legacy, almost like the pain was still too fresh. Nashville didn't just lose its sense of safety, it lost its innocence. The tragedy brought in a new era where people were more cautious and more aware of how vulnerable they really were. The once ingrained sense of security vanished almost overnight. Artists began to take drastic steps to protect themselves and their families. Doors that once remained unlocked were now firmly secured. Some musicians acquired firearms for personal protection, while others chose to move out of their rural country homes into more secure, often gated, communities within or outside Tennessee. Grandpa Jones, deeply affected by his friend's murders, notably changed his state of residence. This shift marked a significant cultural divergence for country music. The industry's culture, once characterized by its unique communal unity, began to resemble that of other genres, such as rock and roll, where artists often existed in more isolated spheres, disconnected from their peers. The era of casual, open-door neighborliness among country stars largely came to an end, replaced by a new reality of fences, alarm systems, and a pervasive sense of caution. Stringbean's enduring legacy. Despite the profound tragedy of his death, David Stringbean Akeman's musical legacy has endured, a testament to his unique talent and the deep affection he garnered. His iconic Vega No. 9 5-string banjo, the instrument he so masterfully played, is now carefully preserved in Nashville's Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, a tangible link to his artistry. In a strange and heartbreaking twist, Stringbean kept appearing on television for months after his death. Because many episodes of Hee Haw had been filmed in advance, viewers continued to see him performing on screen for about 4 months after he was murdered. It was both comforting and unsettling, like a ghostly reminder of the man so many had loved. His jokes, music, and warm presence still made people smile, even as they were grieving his violent and tragic end. This unusual situation made his loss feel even more real, and at the same time, harder to accept. It showed just how deeply he had touched people's lives and how powerful his legacy had become. Today, Stringbean is remembered not only for his distinctive music, his infectious laughter, and his gentle humor, but also profoundly as a tragic symbol of innocence lost for an entire era of country music. His murder, while an immense personal loss, undeniably served as a wake-up call and a turning point for the industry, forcing a reckoning with its vulnerabilities. Over time, tribute songs have emerged, such as The Ballad of Stringbean and Estelle, which bravely explore the ongoing questions of justice, mercy, and the possibility of redemption that still swirl around the case. However, for many decades following the murders, the topic remained incredibly sensitive within the country music community. There was a noticeable reluctance to open old wounds, leading to a relative silence surrounding Stringbean's violent death. For example, his name is rarely, if ever, mentioned on stages like Country's Family Reunion, a show dedicated to celebrating the genre's heritage. This collective silence suggests a deep, unaddressed trauma within the community, a struggle to reconcile the vibrant life of a beloved figure with his brutal, senseless end. The continued presence of Stringbean in Hee Haw after his death, coupled with the later creation of tribute songs, shows a community's complex and often bittersweet struggle to process and memorialize a figure whose life and death so profoundly altered their collective identity. This ongoing process of remembrance, while honoring his legacy, also perpetually reminds the community of the innocence that was irrevocably lost. The unfinished melody. The Stringbean mystery, the brutal double murder of David Stringbean Akeman and his wife Estelle, was indeed solved in the sense that the perpetrators were identified and brought to justice. However, the truth behind this case, as explored, is far from comforting. The loss went beyond the deaths of Stringbean and Estelle. It marked the end of a more innocent time for Nashville's country music community. Their murder, sparked by a false rumor about hidden money, brought nothing of value to the killers. And when the hidden, rotted cash was finally discovered decades later, it only emphasized the senselessness and tragic waste of life. Even years after the release of John Brown, one of the men convicted of the murders reopened painful wounds. For a long time, people avoided talking about the murders, a silence that showed just how deep the pain still ran. Stringbean's story has become one of the most haunting chapters in country music history. It's not just remembered because of his talent, humor, or role in preserving traditional music, but because of the tragedy that ended his life and what it symbolized. His murder became a cautionary tale about how quickly peace can be lost, how greed can destroy lives, and how violence leaves scars far beyond the moment it happens. The murder of Stringbean and Estelle was more than just a shocking crime. It was a turning point. Though the truth is known, the emotional weight of that truth continues to linger, and the Stringbean mystery remains one of the most heartbreaking stories the country music world has ever known. Do you think the Stringbean mystery is truly over? Or is this just the beginning of something bigger? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.